Christians sometimes talk about something called the Last Judgment. The main biblical account that is responsible for the belief in the Last Judgment comes from the 20th chapter of the book of Revelation. It pictures a passage that pictures all the dead people standing before a great white throne. And the passage said they are judged by their works. From the Greek, that is literally from their actions. In other words, the things they have done in their lives. Apparently, the things that they have done in their lives are recorded in books because it mentions books being brought forth and opened, and they are judged according to what they did in their lives. And so the image associated with the Last Judgment is that it matters how you live your life. But this account of the Last Judgment in the 20th chapter of the book of Revelation doesn't have many details. It's a bare bones account. It's more of a mention of it rather than a complete description of it. For our gospel reading today, we heard Jesus say that every person will give an account for every idle word. That is seen as a result, as a reference to the Last Judgment. The most detailed account of what biblical scholars think is the Last Judgment occurs in the Gospel of Matthew. It's the illustration of the sheep and the goats. Everyone is separated out into one of two categories. Either you're a sheep or you're a goat, and you're placed on different sides over here. The sheep are the ones who fed the hungry, gave drink to the thirsty, invited the strangers in, gave clothes to those who needed them, and visited the sick and the prisoners. The goats are the ones who did not feed the hungry, did not give drink to those who were thirsty, did not invite the strangers in, did not give clothes to those who needed them, and did not visit the sick and prisoners. As sheep inherit the kingdom of God. That's what we call heaven. It says the goats are cast out, implying that they go to hell. Now the book of Romans in chapter 12 contains a passage that many associate with the Last Judgment. It says that each of us will give an account of himself to God. And there are other scattered passages in the New Testament that refer to what is believed to be the Last Judgment. And there are places in the New Testament also that list the things that we're not supposed to do. The book of 1 Corinthians says, "Do not be deceived. Neither fornicators, nor idolaters, nor adulterers, nor effeminate, nor homosexuals, nor thieves, nor covetous, nor drunkards, nor revilers, nor extortioners will inherit the kingdom of God." The implication is that people that do these things won't go to heaven. The book of Galatians says, "The works of the flesh are evident. They are adultery, fornication, uncleanness, lewdness, idolatry, sorcery, hatred, contention, jealousy, outburst of wrath, ambition, dissension, heresy, envy, murder, drunkenness, revelry, and the like, of which I tell you now, just as I told you in times past. Those who practice such things will not inherit the kingdom of God." Again, the implication is that people who do those things will not go to heaven. And of course, that goes back to the idea of the Last Judgment. What you did with your life will matter. That's the implication there. Now, all these passages about those lists of things you're not supposed to do, and these passages about the Last Judgment, have caused a lot of consternation among Christians. And there are many different ideas in Christianity about exactly what all that stuff means. But if you pull back from the debate about exactly what it means, you can see that one overriding theme is clear. It matters how you live your life. The things you do in your life matter. And they don't just matter for you today. The things you do in your life here are going to matter for all eternity. They will matter even after you die. And that's the idea of being held accountable for how you live your life. The things you do today, how you live during your life on earth will matter to you for all eternity. It will have an effect for all eternity. Now we can argue and get bogged down in the details about it, but if we do that, we miss the point. And the point is that the way you live your life matters for all eternity. The Bible is very clear on that. But you know, I've said in here before and tried to emphasize that sometimes it's just as important to know what the Bible does not say as it is to know what the Bible does say. And here's something the Bible does not say. The Bible never says that you will be held accountable for what anybody does but you. In other words, the Bible never says you will be held accountable for what anybody else does. I will not be held accountable for what other people do. I'm only going to be held accountable for what I do. You see, there is no hint in the Bible that we bear any responsibility for the bad actions of others. There is no hint in the Bible that I'm going to be held accountable for what anyone else does. There's also no hint in the Bible that if you do look at the Last Judgment as you standing there and God says, okay, I see you do this, there's no hint in the Bible that you say, yeah, God, I did that, but look what he did. There's nothing like that in the Bible. That you can pass the blame for what you did off on somebody else. You are responsible for how you live your life, and you are answerable to that. You are not answerable to anyone else for how they live their life, and you are not going to be able to get by with blaming someone else for the things you did. In other words, God holds each individual accountable for what they do. You're not going to be held accountable for what somebody else does. That's something to stop and think about. And so many times we like to point the finger and blame at other people who are doing wrong. But keep in mind that we're not going to be held accountable for what other people do. We're only held accountable for what we ourselves do. And keep in mind that there is no sense in the Bible that you're being held accountable for what you yourself do is lessened by you being able to point, well, look, God, what they did to me. There's no sense in that, of that in the Bible. Each of us is held accountable for what we'll do. So let's think about something else. You know, people tend to worry a lot about what other people think of them. In fact, you know, we tend to judge the worth of a person by how well they are thought of by other people. If someone is held in high esteem by other people, we tend to hold them in high esteem ourselves. If someone is not held in high esteem by other people, we ourselves tend not to hold them in high esteem. And of course, it's only natural to want other people to hold us in high esteem, to want other people to think highly of us. But you know, that's an idea that we do not find in the Bible. There's nothing in the Bible that places importance on what other people think of us. There's nowhere in the Bible that indicates that God is going to judge us based on how well other people like us. Whether other people like us, whether other people agree with us, whether other people hold us in high regard or not, the Bible attaches no importance to that. Actually, it's just the opposite. In Luke chapter 6, Jesus says, "Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for so did their fathers to the false prophets." I remember one time years ago, somebody that we knew died. And after they died, wanted to say, well, everybody liked him. I never heard a bad word against him. And I quoted that verse and wanted to got mad at him. I said, woe to you when all men speak well of you. So you see, rather than it being a good thing for everybody to speak well of us and agree with us, Jesus says it's a bad thing. And why would that be the case? Well, Jesus tells us, because That's how people speak of the false prophets. They speak well of the false prophet. And that's a reference to the Old Testament. The Old Testament contains many instances where prophets who were speaking from God were ignored and they were persecuted, while prophets who were lying and not speaking from God were praised. In the book of 1 Kings is an interesting account that a lot of people sort of skip over. It's about a prophet named Micaiah. And this was back during the time when King Ahab was king of Israel and King Jehoshaphat was king of Judah. And Ahab got the idea that he wanted to go to war against the land of Ramoth. And so he goes down to Judah and he asks Jehoshaphat to join him. We want to get together and attack Ramoth. And Jehoshaphat said, well, I'm willing to do this, but first I want you to consult the prophets. So Ahab calls in 400 prophets. And every one of them says, go to war and you'll be victorious. And Jehoshaphat is he doesn't trust this 100% agreement. And so he says, well, I want to consult another prophet. Find me another one. And Ahab said, well, I know one more. It's a man named Micaiah, but he always has something bad to say. But Jehoshaphat said, well, bring him in. So Ahab sent a messenger to get him, to bring him in. And in the meantime, these other prophets reinforced their prophecy and told Ahab, yes, we're all in agreement. Go to war against Ramoth and you'll be victorious. So this messenger from the king goes to Micaiah and tells him that all the prophets are in agreement that Ahab will be victorious if he goes to war. And he said, you ought to say the same thing. So Micaiah says, well, I'll say whatever God tells me to say. And he goes to Ahab and he says, go ahead and go to battle against Ramoth and you'll be victorious. Well, here Ahab has had this whole history with this guy who's never said anything good to him. And he said, well, now he's agreeing. So he said, I don't believe you. He said, tell me what you really think. And Micaiah says, well, if you go to war against Ramoth, you'll be killed. And he says, all those other prophets that have been talking to you are liars. And at this point, one of these other prophets comes up and slaps him in the face. Ahab has Micaiah put into prison, and he goes out and he goes to war against Ramoth. And guess what's happened? He gets killed. Now, there are other instances in the Old Testament where false prophets were praised, while those who spoke the truth from God were ignored and persecuted. We see time and time again where that happened. The book of Isaiah tells us how the people said to the prophet, do not prophesy to us right things. Speak to us smooth things. Prophesy deceit. The book of Jeremiah says, the prophets prophesy falsely, the priests rule by their own power, and my people love to have it so. You see, people want to be told what they want to hear. People love those who tell them what they want to hear, but they tend not to like those who tell them what they do not want to hear. People love those who go along with the flow. People tend not to like those who refuse to go along with the flow. And stuff like this is what Jesus was referring to when he said, woe to you when all men speak well of you, for so did their fathers to the false prophets. And that should make us think. We should not automatically believe someone who is held in highest esteem. Just think of events recently. We're told we have to believe this person or this person or this person because they're held in such high esteem. Woe to you when all men speak well of you. We should be wary of those who are held in high esteem. And by the same token, we should not automatically dismiss what someone says just because they are not held in high esteem by other people. Maybe the ones no one likes, maybe the ones who say things no one wants to hear, and the ones who say things that are not popular to say. Maybe those are the people we should be paying attention to, because remember, Jesus said people will always love the false prophets. And remember what Jesus said would happen to the true prophet. In Matthew chapter 10, Jesus said, "Behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be as wise as serpents and harmless as doves. But beware of men, for they will deliver you up to the councils and scourge you in the synagogue." In Matthew chapter 23, Jesus is talking to the Jewish leaders, and he tells them this: "I will send you prophets, wise men, and scribes. Some of them you will kill and crucify. Some of them you will scourge in your synagogue and persecute from city to city." The true prophets will not be liked, and few people will want to listen to them. Well, we know that happened back in biblical times. That's 2,000 or 3,000 years ago. That doesn't hold true in our society today. It's different today. That Ahab and all those people back then, all those lying prophets he had, that was back then. We don't have stuff like that today. And those Jewish leaders that tried to persecute all the Christians, we don't have stuff like that going on today. We don't have people like that in society today. Things are different. Don't fool yourself. The situation today is just like it was back in 2,000, 3,000 years ago. People today also prefer the false prophets. People today prefer the people who tell them what they want to hear. People today prefer those who go along with the party line. People today prefer those who support whatever narrative is current at the moment. We might live 2,000 or 3,000 years later than those people, but people are still people. And that's why we always need to keep in mind that those who are thought highly of, those who are held in highest esteem, those whom everyone believes, those whom everyone turns to, those who always go along with whatever's current at the moment, those are the people we should be wary of. That's not necessarily to say they're false prophets, only that we should be wary of them. And so one of the things we don't have to worry about is we should not worry about what other people think of us. I know it's hard, and I'm preaching to the choir here. We should not fret over whether we are held in high esteem by other people, whether other people like us, whether other people want to hear what we have to say, and whether other people agree with us. And you know, we certainly should not judge the worth of a person by whether everybody agrees with them and whether everybody likes them and wants to hear what they have to say. If everyone is loving us and praising us, it should make us wonder if maybe we're on the wrong track. And we probably should consider that some of these people that are out there saying things that nobody wants to hear, that people think are stupid and that everybody hates to hear, maybe some of the things we should be paying attention to. So I want to think about something else. It's so easy to worry about how other people treat us. You know, I know people who really get depressed when they do something for a person and then that person doesn't do anything for them. But you know, there's nothing in the Bible that tells us to worry about how other people treat us. Not a thing. There's a lot in the Bible that tells us that we should treat other people well. And that's the only thing that's important, how we treat other people. There's nothing in the Bible that tells us to worry about how other people treat us. Jesus tells us to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. Doesn't matter how they do unto you. It is how you would have them do unto you. Jesus never says we should worry about how other people treat us. He only tells us to worry about how we treat other people. In fact, he specifically tells us not to worry about how other people treat us. In Luke chapter 6, Jesus said, "Love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return." Notice that, expecting nothing in return. You see, the measure is not what people do for us. The measure is what we do for others. And if they do not do in return, then so be it. We don't have to worry about that. All we worry about is what we do, how we act toward them. Different people over the years have told me, no one loves me, no one cares about me. And really what I tried to say to them in so many words without saying was, well, who do you love? That's all that matters. Now, we've looked at some things today that we do not have to worry about. We do not have to worry about what other people think of us. We do not have to worry about what other people do. And we do not have to worry about how other people treat us. But you know, so many people in our society today actually obsess over those things. People obsess over what other people are doing. People obsess over what other people think of them. People obsess over how other people treat them. We've seen the whole society about blow up in the past few months over people obsessing about how other people treat them. We see that all over the place. And yet those things are things that are not even on the radar of the Bible. We're not supposed to worry about what other people do because we're not going to be held accountable for that. We're only going to be held accountable for what we do. We're not supposed to worry about whether other people hold us in high esteem or not. In fact, the Bible tells us that the people who are held in highest esteem are the ones that we should be wary of. We're not supposed to worry about how other people treat us. All we're supposed to worry about is how we treat other people. And so we go through our lives remembering those things. I'm only going to be held accountable for what I do. We live our lives according to what we perceive as God's truth, and we don't pay any attention whether other people like it or not. It doesn't matter. We love our neighbor as we love ourselves, and we do unto others as we would have them do unto you. And it doesn't matter how other people treat us. That's not the standard. If you can get over worrying about the three things we've talked about today, when you really think of it, there's a certain amount of freedom that comes from that. There's a certain amount of freedom involved in not having to worry about what other people do. There's a certain amount of freedom involved in not having to worry about what other people think of. And there's a certain amount of freedom involved in not having to worry about how other people treat you. I really think if we could take these things to heart, it could ease a lot of stress on ourselves, and we could have much happier lives. Because there is a certain amount of freedom when we realize we do not have to worry about those things.